Coming to paperback and e-readers this April, Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. The goddess next door must take on the threat of a deadly digital diva driven to destroy the world in this action-packed all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess in paperback and e-readers this April. One of my viewers sent me a link to an article about a Columbia University professor who says he uses heroin and how the drug helps him maintain a work-life balance. Now, after reading the article about this Columbia University professor, Carl Hart, I had to shake my head. And the reason why I had to shake my head regarding your Carl Hart and his new book, Drug Use for Grown-Ups, is because I know for a fact that using heroin, it does not help anybody maintain a work-life balance. No, people who use heroin, their life just falls completely off a cliff. And I know this to be a fact because as I was working at AmeriCorps Vista with the Strive Job Readiness Workshop, I worked with a lot of ex-addicts, and many of the trainers there themselves were ex-addicts, and they talked not about work-life balance, they talked about how addiction practically destroyed their lives. So they had a completely different experience than this Columbia professor who we at the Strive Job Readiness Workshop would call a functional addict. And we know that a functional addict can only remain functional only for a short period of time. Because yes, there are functional addicts who go out here and take drugs, and they're able to do this for a while, but eventually what happens is the addiction winds up overtaking them, and that addiction winds up overtaking them to the point where it becomes their primary focus for life. So this Columbia professor, he's proposing a very dangerous theory as related to his argument, because he's sitting there talking about how the drug helped him maintain a work-life balance. But as somebody who has worked with ex-addicts and also lived in neighborhoods with drug addicts, I can tell you many of those people did not maintain any sort of work-life balance. No, their life practically fell off a cliff, and many of these people wound up strung out on the streets with absolutely nothing after a couple of months. Now, this professor, as he also goes on to say that your heroin should be legal for everyone, and I think that would be one of the worst things anybody could ever propose as related to this drug. Now, your heroin is a highly addictive drug, and it's one that once you get on it, you practically can't really get off it, because after you get on this drug and you wind up strung out on heroin and you want to try to get your life back in order, what happens is you have to wind up taking methadone as a substitute for heroin. And I've seen all these heroin addicts back when I used to go to my post office to pick up my mail. They would be standing outside the Bronx Lebanon clinic waiting for their methadone at 8, maybe 9 a.m. And I would be walking by and they would just be there. So I know how this drug practically destroys people's lives. And I don't believe it should be legal for anyone, because most of the people who wind up on heroin, they wind up dependent on some type of substance for life. And I can honestly tell you from, again, listening to people and seeing people, it doesn't help anybody maintain a work-life balance, because people on heroin usually wind up nodding most of the day. So they're not usually doing much work on the job, because when a heroin addict is high, they're practically out of it. So how is that helping him maintain a work-life balance? That's the critical question I want to ask this Carl Hart regarding heroin use. He's sitting there talking about how it helps him maintain a work-life balance, but this drug, like weed, makes a lot of people lazy. So how are they able to remain productive if they're practically out of it on this heroin? I mean, that's a critical question I have to ask your Carl Hart. I mean, when I listen to his rhetoric talking about how this drug helped him feel dreamy and light and free of stress, and it doesn't make any logical sense. He's talking about how people can use this heroin like alcohol, but this heroin does damage to people's lives, and even worse, it's not just the drug use, it's the addiction that winds up taking people and destroying their lives. So I don't see how this drug use is going to help benefit society like he proposes. And when I listen to this guy, I hear nothing more than the words of a white supremacist, because what white supremacy loves to do is passively publish and promote the work of individuals like your Carl Hart, but aggressively use his face and image to demonize the image of black men. Because what they will do is go out here and have this guy publish his papers, promote his work, but they will use this as a weapon against black men. And what they will do is say, oh, because this guy's talking about how he used drugs and promotes drug use, this is a reason and a justification for not hiring other black men like myself. And because this man is working in academia and in the Ivy Leagues and he is sitting there thinking he's moving his life ahead, but what he's doing is making life harder for every other black man out here, because they will take this one black man's image, this one black man's narrative, and this one black man's ideas, and use it as a justification for closing the door on other brothers out here like myself, and they will use his whole drug addiction against him and against other black people. What they will do is say, oh, we don't want to go out here and give another black man tenure because he'll be like Carl Hart, sitting on the job, taking heroin, and be an extremely lazy person. That's what these white supremacists in academia will do. Again, they will passively promote this black man and his ideas, but then aggressively use this black man's arguments to close the door on opportunities for advancement or getting into any sort of employment for other black men, because they will make this black man's face the one as related to laziness, incompetence, and use his own arguments as related to using drugs as a reason for not wanting to hire other black people. So this guy really doesn't see the big picture as related to black Americans' image, and he doesn't see the bigger picture as related to how white supremacy wants to use him as a pawn in their chess game. Yes, they will go out here and promote this black male and his crazy ideas as related to heroin use being perfectly fine for a work-life balance, but they're not going to promote that as the ideal for white men and white women, and they don't see that as part of their work-life balance. And what they will do again is use this Ivy League guy's whole face as something to go against black people, because we know that heroin use and drug use do not help people maintain a work-life balance. It leads to people winding up becoming dependent on these illegal substances in order to get through a day, and eventually this addiction ultimately consumes these individuals and destroys their lives. Now, this Ivy League professor at Columbia University, he may not have gotten to that stage in his life just yet, but it's just a matter of time before addiction finally consumes this man, and he winds up strung out like so many heroin addicts I used to walk by in my South Bronx neighborhood almost for the last 40 plus years, because I've seen drug addicts in my neighborhood. Many of these people, they started out like your Carl Hart with a good job, but then eventually addiction wound up overtaking them. And even if you did make drugs legal, these people would not be able to hold a job because eventually addiction would finally consume them, and they would wind up destroying everything that they ever worked for, and that drug use would practically be the only thing keeping them going until they met their final demise. So this delusional black male college professor, he's pushing an agenda that really is part of anti-black racism, because what they want to do is say, oh, we've got this black professor who's coming up with this argument, and then we're going to use his face to push this whole narrative. And then as we're pushing this narrative, we then are taking this swipe at black men by saying, oh, if we put a black man in academia, he's not going to be thinking about going out here and improving the quality of people's lives. I mean, this is a so-called psychology professor. He's not talking about the men in crisis like I did with the man crisis. No, he's putting men in crisis by promoting the use of drugs, making it legal, and pushing men towards addiction. So when they go out here and promote this black professor passively, they are promoting him in order to aggressively go after black people. And they want to go out here and demonize the black man's image and make it look like he's the most incompetent person in the room, even though he's got a college degree. So this guy thinks he's being presented as somebody intelligent, but he can't see that white supremacists are just making a mockery of him, and he can't see that they're pushing his thesis in order to go out here and make mockery of him, because Americans have to villainize drugs, because he's saying we should not villainize drugs. But when we see drug addiction destroying people's lives, and I've seen drug addiction destroy people's lives, and I've heard the stories about drug addiction destroying people's lives, I know that substances like heroin and cocaine and crack cocaine, they don't go out here and help you maintain a work-life balance. They turn people into shells of their former selves, and it makes it where these people just can't function, and it will practically eventually destroy a person's life to the point where they're in the streets and in the gutter. That's what happens to people who go out here and talk about they were starting out in the beginning, oh, I was able to I need this drug to maintain a work-life balance. Their life becomes completely unbalanced, and eventually a lot of these males especially become men in crisis and women in crisis. And for this professor to go out here and promote this idea just shows how irresponsible academia is, and it shows how out of touch academia is as related to the arguments they present as related to drugs. And this guy, again, he's being pushed out here because white supremacy loves to send out an academic clown to push narratives that make black people look bad and make it harder for other black men to be able to find success. Because when this guy goes out here and pushes this narrative and then also goes out here and starts to fail as related to addiction, they can go out here and say, we shouldn't have gone out here and pushed another black man, because if we push this black man, eventually all he's going to do is self-destruct. So we should not go out here and hire another black man for tenure. Now, I find it interesting, this guy who pushes drug use gets tenure, but your Cornel West, who is one of our great black intellectuals, can't get any tenure. It just shows you again how these white supremacists in these Ivy League institutions are. If you're about pushing narratives that destroy black people, they will go out here and give you tenure because they believe that they're going to get a benefit from it, and they're going to get a benefit from your crazy ideas because they will allow whites to be able to benefit in society. Because to sit there and say, again, that heroin gives him a work-life balance, And he's not thinking about the rest of us, nor is he thinking about how he is going to be represented as to all of Black America, because they will take his face and take him and use him as the reason to say, oh, we can't go out here and hire other Black people because this guy is talking about drug use and he's talking about using it as part of his work-life balance, and that's going to unbalance our business, so we can't bring in any other Black people. So I look at this guy, and I just see another pawn of white supremacy, another pawn white supremacy wants to use to destroy Black people. And many people, they won't see the subtle politics transpiring around them, around this individual. But as somebody who can see the bigger picture on the chessboard, I can see how this pawn is being used to destroy the image of Black men and being used to destroy the lives of Black people, because there's no way illegal drugs like heroin help improve a person's quality of life. I've seen it firsthand. And I've seen it and listened to it from people at the Strive Job Readiness Workshop. Most of those so-called functional addicts become dysfunctional after a couple of months or a couple of years, and eventually they don't wind up having anything at the end of their long addiction except a fast trip to rock bottom. Now, if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, and my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to learn more about addiction and the man crisis, you can pick up my book, The Man Crisis, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find it on Smashwords, the iBook Store, and Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Coming to paperback and e-readers in 2021, John Haynes, Taking Care of Business. The man who rules the world breaks on a brand new partner to help him take care of business in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get John Haynes, Taking Care of Business in 2021 at online booksellers everywhere.